On April 15th, the largest Tea Party gathering, about 100 days into Barack Obama's presidency. Tea parties all over the country, just like this and in smaller towns. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. We had never seen working Americans. These weren't professional protesters. These were real Americans taking to the streets. And the president's spokesman said he wasn't aware, on that very day, said he wasn't aware the Tea Party was meeting. And I kid you not, he was preparing for his speech in Egypt where he would apologize to the Muslims for attacking us. He wasn't aware. They sought to marginalize us. We were just going to go back to our lives. We weren't going to sustain this effort. And then the town hall meetings happened, and they thought they'd bring their planted folks to ask them questions, and it would look nice, but we showed up, and we asked questions, because we need that health care, and we pay for it. And so then they referred to us in nasty sexual terms, and that didn't work. And then they trotted out Bill Clinton, because he's the best they have. And he said, this reminds me of Timothy McVeigh, and I think one of these people is going to blow something up. And that was the refrain for a while. And then you had the Times Square potential bombing. Before we knew anything about him, they all came out and said, I bet it's one of those angry Tea Party folks. No, it was yet another Muslim terrorist. And when that didn't work, they couldn't tell our fellow Americans that we didn't exist, we'd go away, we were some sexual act, or now they're angry people who are going to blow something up. People started saying, wait a second, that's my mom. The Tea Party is my mom and my neighbor and me and my friends and my teacher and my pastor. And all of a sudden we realized that the Tea Party was America. More than America was America. And the Tea Party was proud to be American, even if our president and the media isn't. And then we saw they pulled out the last of the cards, and that was racism, but it had been so overplayed that that one didn't even get the attention it would have before. And then we saw through this summer and now in this fall, the president, shocking, coming out and saying, they've got a lot of good points. We saw Jimmy Carter say, I was elected on the backs of people like the Tea Party, people that want to take back their country. Wait a second. We even saw Nancy Pelosi coming out and saying, okay, yeah, that's great, but what's their foreign policy? We have arrived, folks. We have a seat at the table. I just hate that they won't get to stay and dine with us. If all you do is come to a rally with people that think just like you do, and cheer and hold up signs and feel proud of yourself and go home, we won't take back this country. This is the fun stuff. This is where we gather and enjoy. This is where we gather among like-minded patriots and look around and say, you know what, I'm not alone. There's a lot of people that want to take back this country, and they're willing to do whatever it takes. So leave this place and go and take back your country. Let me leave you with a quick story, one of my favorites in history, that of Paul Revere. And this is a pretty young crowd, but some of you will remember Paul Revere and the Raiders. I'm not talking about that one. Hungry and kick and all that good stuff. I'm talking about the original Paul Revere. I'm talking about the original Paul Revere 11 years before this country was its own country. And 20 years before the Constitution was written. When these colonists, who were actually Englishmen, said, that throne that we pledged allegiance to is taxing us, it's oppressing us, it's abusing us, and we'll stand for it no more. So they were going to be attacked by the British soldiers, the mightiest empire in the world. And all they had were the muskets they used to shoot squirrels and provide food for the family. These were not professional soldiers. These were people just like you. If I were to ask you to go home and get your guns, because we can still have guns in America, and fend off an invading army, or maybe some army that's been taken over by those who don't wish us well. And if we were to have to defend our families and our communities, that's what happened in 1775. And I love the story of Paul Revere, and it's important for what we're doing today. And you remember the poem you learned in school, "Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere." On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is still alive who remembers that famous day and year. But you know what? That's not true. We all remember that story. We all remember the real message. Remember? They only had enough townsfolk to fight off the bigger, better equipped, better trained military of the British throne if they knew exactly where they were going to land. Would they come by land, or would they come by sea? So they devised a system. Paul Revere did. One light in the belfry arch, in the cathedral arch, if by land, and two if by sea. And we know, of course, they hung 2 lamps. We know the townspeople were prepared in the middle of the night when they attacked, and by daybreak, the carnage was amazing. These folks had fought for their lives. They weren't even Americans yet. They just knew that they weren't going to let any government, even of their own countrymen, take of their bounty, take of their hard work. And it's an amazing story that cries out through history because it's the founding of this country and the spirit that makes us what we are. But the lesson I want you to take from that story today is this. You know that Paul Revere rode to Middlesex. You know he told the people they're coming by sea because he saw the 2 lights. And you know the townsfolk fought valiantly against a better army and won it. And a year later we declared our independence. And 11 years later we wrote a constitution that still stands today. And I don't know about you, but I've taken to reading that thing quite often. And when you think about what they did, you think about how important that moment of history is, and you think about our heritage and our legacy, wherever you came from, you came to a country that was founded out of that amazing battle that was the battle cry for the early colonists that became Americans. And you remember the memory of Paul Revere. But I don't want you to think about Paul Revere. Does anybody remember the guy who lit the 2 lamps? He was quartered amongst the British soldiers on the other side of the water. He had to walk around amongst them. If at any moment they suspected him, they would kill him on the spot. Because he wasn't a loyalist to the throne, he was trying to help these colonists create the greatest nation on earth. But they didn't know that at the time, they just wanted freedom. And he had to listen and he had to understand because they didn't know what night it would be, they didn't know where they'd go. And he did. He infiltrated their group. And he snuck out in the middle of the night risking his life. And he lit those 2 lamps. And the people of Middlesex fought back, and this great nation was born. Does anybody remember who lit those lamps? Does anybody remember who lent the horse to Paul Revere? Because it was not his own. Me neither. That's the story. You see, the Paul Reveres talk on the radio. They're seen on the TV. They hold elected office. But all they're really doing is spreading the message that was given to them. All they're really doing is mobilizing the people that will have to go and fight the battle. Paul Revere didn't earn our liberty and our independence. It was the guy whose name we'll never know who lit those lamps. It was the people whose names history doesn't record who fought those battles and lost their lives. That, folks, is you. Now is your time. And I don't worry whether you'll heed the call, because you are Americans, and we always do. Go take back your country!